If you've ever been curious about the rise and the fall of the 6.8 SPC, well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video, and you clicked on the right video. Now, Vortec had just did a podcast where they had basically covered the same exact topic. I feel they kind of missed the mark. It was a damn good podcast. You should go check it out, full of great information. But what I seen happen with the 6.8 SPC was a little bit different than what they had described in their video. So let's talk about it. When the 6.8 SPC hit the market, basically you were looking at three different cartridges. You could pick 5.56, 7.62 by 39, or of course the 308. Or 7.62 by 51, whatever you'd like to call it. Well, at that time, if you wanted to buy an AR, and this is no bullshit, you were spending 2, 3, sometimes even 4 times more than you would spend on an AK-47. So obviously, us poor people, we bought AK-47s. What's the problem? You know, it's got more kinetic energy, magazines are available, because you can't forget about the AWB. That was just clearing when the 6.8 SPC really hit the market. And the AWB basically meant if you got magazines for your AR, at best they're going to be unreliable. That's at best. Or you're going to have like a 10-round mag. It's going to suck. And that's mainly because of the magazine. If you do actually have a 30, that bitch was liberated like a long ass time ago. It's been loaded so many times, it doesn't work. It is wore out. So the AWB hits, and all these Chinese magazine manufacturers like just started selling these magazines that were just garbage. Like when Magpul came out with their mag, that was a game changer for the AR-15. Now all of a sudden it's reliable. Yeah, we got good mags now. Like seriously, like this Harper Connecticut mag, this is a good magazine. It wasn't the case back then, not in 03. Again, if you had a 30-round magazine, it was unreliable. Best case scenario, you know, you got a good 20 that was liberated in Vietnam and somehow still works. So, the AK, readily available 30-round magazines, because these were made long before the AWB, and they were made en masse, and they were in circulation. They were available. You could get a 30 without a problem for your AK-47. So, if you wanted an AR, minimum you're paying 3 times more than an AK-47, and you're limited on magazine capacity. If you do actually get the same capacity, your AR isn't going to run. It's going to be a Jam Master, just full of malfunctions. It's going to have problems. Well, at the same time, all of a sudden the Magpul videos start coming out. And you'd watch them do a magazine change, and it'd be like, da 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 da. Da 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 da. And then you'd grab your AK-47, you'd be like, wow, that was pretty fast. Let's try a fast mag change with your AK. So you'd come up, you'd hit this latch, you knock the other one out, and you'd be like, you're like, wow, that was kind of slow. Let's try it again. And you lock it in. You're like, you know, that was fast, but that was not even near the speed at what I'm seeing in those Magpul videos, and I had an AK-47. Well, my assistant manager at the time, his name was Dave, and he had AR-15s. I go over to his house, playing with it. I'm like, wow. And then I come up with the mag, I can literally just take my thumb and hit the bolt release. Like, this is amazing. And I realized how much of an advantage the AR has over the AK-47. I'm playing with the controls, I'm like, wow, this safety is like right where you'd want it to be. Grab my AK, playing with the safety, I'm like, this is just stupid, but I wasn't convinced yet. No, I mean, I'm still stuck on the fact that I could have a higher capacity, reliability, and I can put more kinetic energy on the target with my AK-47 that I paid a third, sometimes even a fourth of what he paid for his AR-15. Moving on to 7.62 by 39. We're shooting Chinese ammunition, grain weight unknown, full metal jacket, lead core. And that all eventually changed. One day, I took that AK-47 out to about 500 yards. And it was painful. And it was a very valuable learning lesson. I learned that the difference in kinetic energy between like a 5.56 and an AK-47 really isn't all that much. And I learned where exactly on the target can I get hit with a 5.56 and survive, but I cannot get hit in that exact same place with a 7.62 by 39 and die. That's when I learned it's way more important to be able to get rounds on target over having more kinetic energy. That seriously was a game changer. Like, that opened my eyes. It's way more important to be able to hit the target than it is to have extra kinetic energy. So I'm like, okay, I do need to change. I need to get away from the AK-47. It doesn't shoot. Then I had run through a bunch of bad AKs. Like, I had a Mac 90 that I had trigger slapped so bad with like a welding glove and a snowmobile glove over top of that. I could only shoot like a half of a magazine and my trigger finger would be sore. I got a Wasser 10 that was a malfunction machine. And there was Tantals that had keyholing problems. So I'm like, okay. I'm going to go into the AR scene. Well, I had sold my Jimmy. This is a vehicle I made. Looks like this right here. Back when I was a teenager. And a guy gave me a Corvette and just a stack of cash. So I'm like, okay, I want to move away from the AK-47. I want to get an AR style platform. What do I get? Well, I played with some M14s, didn't really like it. It had a lot of the same disadvantages as the AK-47. And then I discovered the Armorlight AR-10 A2 carbine. And I was like, oh my god, that's gold. It's got all the same controls as the AR-15, but I get to shoot a much larger cartridge. So fuck Dave, he's a bitch anyway. I want a better gun than him, so I went and got an AR-10. Shows little 5.56s what's up. So I buy this AR-10, and this is the gun that got stolen from me down in Illinois. Gets stolen from me. I really loved it a lot. I knew I definitely did not want to go back to an AK-47. I just couldn't handicap myself that bad, because we all shot, like, all the time. This was before the 2013 ammo crunch, so like, we shot a lot. So there was no difference really in skill level. It came to who had a better platform, and the disadvantages they had with their platform would make them a better shooter. Like, if I went and took my good old AK out against an AR-15, they'd walk me in circles. Even though I was a more experienced shooter, because this is such a much harder platform to shoot, they would do better than me. A lot better than me. So, okay. I don't have an AR-10 anymore. I have cash. I want to get an AR-15 because the biggest problem I had with the AR-10 is when I'd go up against somebody with an AR-15, they could just put more lead on target. Because of the recoil the AR-10 had, they could just outrun circles on. They could run circles around me. They'd hit targets, they'd be smacking them at range, and I'd be like, boom! Hit the target, and then I go to aim at the next target, and I look, and they're like 4 more targets ahead of me. I'm like, okay, I need to bring the recoil down a little bit because I want to get competitive. I can't compete with an AR-10. I just can't. Not against the 5.56 recoil. It's too fast. It can put too much lead down range too quickly. At this time, a bunch of cartridges hit the market at the exact same time. You got the 6.8 SPC. Now, that wasn't the exact same time, but they were close enough to where a lot of data got confused. The 300 Blackout was a 300 Whisper, but that ultimately died and became 300 Blackout. And the 6.5 Grendel. So I start looking at ballistics, like, what do I want? I want, for sure, an AR-15 package. The controls are just so much nicer. I don't want to take the handicap of, like, an AK-47 or an M14. And yes, the AR-10 was great, but the recoil seriously handicapped me when I go to shoot against people. I want to back that recoil down a little bit. So, what do we got for choices? And I started looking at different internet forums, stuff like that, looking at data. I think a lot of people got confused too, because I swear to God, the data I had seen showed the 6.8 SPC outperforming the 308 in range. Now, I didn't understand really ballistics at that time, and now I know that they used a 308 with a really short barrel and a 6.5 Grendel with a really long barrel, and then somehow got those numbers messed up and screwed up with a 6.8. So I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, wow, a 308 can only shoot 800 yards? Like, it's a mind blow. Like, how is this cartridge only capable of 800 yards? I just assumed, you know, that was... I didn't realize that their test barrel obviously was really short. It had to have been like 16 inches or shorter. And it's not that it can only shoot 800 yards. That's where it stays above a certain velocity. It can definitely shoot much farther. And I look at the 6.8 SPC, which I am very confident with that the ballistic data between the 6.8 SPC and the 308 or 6.5 Grendel, it got confused. I'm like, oh, well, the 6.8 SPC can shoot 1100 yards. Obviously, the alligator eats the bigger number. So 1100 is greater than 800. I want to go with 1100. Like, okay, you know, that makes a lot of sense. Like, well, what about the kinetic energy with the 5.56? Because, I mean, yes, I watch these people rock the 5.56, and it's beautiful. It looks really good. But again, I'm still stuck on kinetic energy at that time because I didn't quite still realize, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm like, well, at 100 yards, the 5.56 has just a little over 1,000 foot-pounds of energy, but the 6.8 has an extra 300 foot-pounds. Now, the number just wasn't grasping in my head. Like, I was seeing it as a third more kinetic energy. That's what my brain was putting together. I'm like, it's basically got a third more kinetic energy. So, like, okay, that's really great. Now, all of a sudden, we're down to where AR-15s are getting affordable. I decide I want to build one, and I wind up chambering it in the 6-point SPC. Why? Because at the time, I thought this was ballistically superior to the 308. Now I know better. At the time, there was a channel called Future Weapons where that bald bastard sold the shit out of this. Because remember, they're still operating under the principle that a bunch of broke people own AK-47s and they say they won't go to an AR-15 because it doesn't have enough kinetic energy. Well, the real story was it was because they were f***ing broke. If they wouldn't have been broke, they would have bought an AR-15 because it's a superior platform. So you got all those people complaining about the kinetic energy with AR-15, so they make the 6.8, so the AR-15 can have the same kinetic energy, so they can put their product on the market and be able to sell it to those AK people. But again, they didn't realize the real problem is they didn't want to spend 3 times as much to get this platform. Sometimes even 4 times as much. So, they put out a cartridge that fits in there. Biggest problem is it doesn't take the same bolt face. If it took the same bolt face, it probably would have been more commercially successful, but at that time, you know, still, like, parts are expensive. So, they dropped that. The bald guy from Future Weapons just advertised the shit out of it. There was some internet confusion, giving it some false ballistics, making it look really good. I ultimately winded up going with it. Well, the shortcomings started showing itself. What are we talking about shortcomings? Alright, at 100 yards, the 6.8 SPC, 110 grain projectile, that's my particular 6.8 SPC flavor of choice. It just offered what I liked. It only has 2,329 feet per second. 5.56, we're looking at 2,918 feet per second. Okay, so who cares? What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with the price in China? That makes that 6.8 SPC much harder to shoot over a 5.56. 200 yards, the drop on the 110 grain, you're looking at 2.1 MOA. 5.56, 1. That's double the drop. Now you got 300 yards, we got 5.3 MOA. 5.56, you got 3. Not quite double, but damn near. 400 yards, 9.1 MOA. 5.56, 5.5 MOA. So, the 5.56 has a whole lot less drop over the 6.8 SPC, which makes the 6.8 SPC a harder gun to shoot. Again, show me where exactly I can hit this target and it will survive a 5.56, but a shot in that exact same spot, under the exact same circumstances, a 6.8 SPC is efficient. It's not. It's way more effective to actually hit what you're shooting at than put extra kinetic energy into the dirt. The 5.56 is an easier cartridge to shoot. And it only took a matter of time for people to start realizing that and be like, why would I want the 6.8 SPC? It's a much harder cartridge to shoot when I go inside of an animal. And yes, I owned a 6.8 SPC, so I've been inside of deer that I've hit with 5.56, 7.62 by 39, and 6.8 SPC. I can tell you from personal experience going inside, if I didn't know what rifle had shot that deer, I could not tell you by looking at the damage inside which one it was. They're identical. There is no visual difference, or at least I haven't ever seen any. I've only cut open one deer with a 6.8 SPC, but I hit that bastard like 5 times. But I have cut open several with a 7.62 by 39 and a 5.56. I can't tell the difference. It looks identical when you're talking about damage inside of the animal. So, do I want to take a cartridge that is harder to shoot, that just brings a little bit more kinetic energy to the table, that doesn't make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Or do I want to pick a cartridge that has a lighter recoil, it's easier to shoot, and it's just as devastating inside of fleshy targets? Yeah, maybe against like concrete bricks or something like that, you could tell the difference between a 6.8 and a 5.56, but when you get inside of soft material, it looks identical, because the 5.56 just has the velocity and it's bad. You cut open an animal that's been shot with any of those, it's pretty bad, but none of them compare to like, say, like a 308. If a 5.56 does not have enough kinetic energy to do the job, you're going to have to step up to a 308. There's just not enough difference in kinetic energy with 6.8 SPC or 7.62 by 39 compared to a 5.56. This is a superior cartridge. Easier to shoot, less recoil. All the parts are already set up for it. You don't have to get a special bolt. You don't have to get a special barrel. All your ballistic tables are already done for you. You just go on the internet because it's so common. Brass everywhere for the 5.56. There's piles and piles of projectiles. Ammo's readily available. Yeah, 6.8 SPC does pop up in store from time to time. But really, 5.56, like, oh my god, you can go into just about any store and there will be 5.56 on the table. There will not be 6.8 SPC. So another thing they brought up in their video is, what if it dropped right now? Would it be more commercially successful? No. When it dropped back then, it had on its side the AWB, super cheap AK-47s, super expensive AR-15s, no reliable AR-15 magazines, a whole community of people that won't accept the fact that they're broke and that's why they don't want an AR-15. They're still convinced it's because it doesn't have enough kinetic energy. Because today we're all way more educated, YouTube makes us all educated, we already know these things. So if the 6.8 dropped today, no, it would be dead on arrival. It would not have near the commercial success it had back then. Remember, it had everything stacked in its advantage. It even had a guy from Future Weapons talk about how awesome it is, and it still couldn't become commercially successful. It doesn't have a chance in hell. Like, pretend like you could go back, you're have the magic gauntlet, you snap your fingers, it never existed before, and it dropped as of today, it would be dead on arrival. Back then, it had a lot of advantages. It had a lot of commercial advantages that helped it get off of the ground. Without those advantages, no, it would be a total flop cartridge. So, if it dropped today, no, it would not be successful. Why was it not successful even though it dropped back then and had all the commercial advantages over what it has today? Because it has too many ballistic disadvantages. It's harder to shoot. Again, it's got about double the recoil. Well, it's not really double the recoil. It's got similar recoil to an AK-47. It's not double the AR-15, but it's significantly more. You have to have special parts to use it, a special bolt carrier, stuff like that. You're probably not going to get a chrome line barrel. It's probably going to be something in stainless steel or QPQ. We all want chrome line barrels. Those options just aren't available. It doesn't have a standalone platform. If the 7.62x39 did not have a standalone platform, that cartridge would be dead too. But because you buy a rifle that's already chambered in it, it's already set up for it, it keeps it alive. Yeah, HK did that 6.8 REC, I think it was called, or something like that. And that's kind of like its standalone platform. But it was overpriced and it wasn't really that good. Anyway, I hope this kind of like helped you take a step back in time and see things the way I did. If you like to help support the channel, got my Patreon right there. I also have affiliate links in the description down below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.